Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another ISTN talk. This is SyncIpswich's talk this evening from the lovely Chris Rares, and this was a postponed talk from last month. And Chris has very kindly come back and arranged to give this talk for us. So asking for help. So I think it's Ask Me Anything. Is that not AMA that it should be called according to my social trends? So ask me anything. So Chris is going to give you a talk and then he'll give us all the instructions. So I'm going to, while you're there, any of you that don't know us, I'm going to drop a link into the chat about the ISTN itself. So we're essentially an umbrella organization that hosts a series of talks. So far they sit in the kind of small business education, developers or startup talks. We also have loads of other. There's an Agile user group. There are Azure user groups, AWS user groups. We've got specialisms within security. We've got OWASP, which is another one that we, some of the guys from there are here this evening. So that's another specialism around cybersecurity. So there's lots and lots and lots going on. So if you sign up to the ISTN, you should get access to everything. So I'll drop it in the chat. Feel free to sign up. But now I will hand over to Chris Philippe. Yes, there you go.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that, Sam. And thank you for having me tonight. Thanks for rearranging this after unfortunately we weren't able to do last month's talk. This is the same talk as we were going to do last month. And yeah, so I want to keep this relatively conversational. I'll try and keep the history bit relatively short. Everything that I'm going to say, keep in mind that there were a lot of other things happening around that time, mainly because of the way that we were working, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It's all about business support programs and the ups and downs of running a not-for-profit business, and also as you will have seen in the description, why your first business should not be a not-for-profit, and I will go into that in a second. To begin with, I just wanted to introduce myself and give you a bit more of a background. This is me. I'm Chris. I'm 29, soon to be 30 next year, which is a really big one for me. I describe myself as a team player, but the main part that I want to talk about in this session is that I'm not used to asking for help, and I'll go into that in a bit. You might ask, oh Chris, but you're a team player, why do you say that you don't ask for help? I'm not talking about asking people to help me out with things like, oh, could you please host this, or could you please I don't know, create this marketing plan. That's not what this is about. It's about all of that higher level of help that as a business, that as a small business owner, as a business owner or a manager, you need to ask of people who are in similar positions to you, of organizations who are in similar positions to you, and sometimes you might even classify them as competitors. But to begin with, I just want to turn the tables a little bit and engage with you, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell me a little bit about yourself, you know, what your name is, what your title is, what's the company what's the company that you work for, that you've created, and tell me when was the last time that you asked for help. So I'm going to leave about 2 minutes for that. I'm just going to mute myself to allow everybody to do that, and I'm going to go through a couple of the answers before moving on. I think that way we get to know each other a little bit more, and also it's creating that level of vulnerability where I hope that we'll be able to actually help each other more by the end of the talk, just because we do get to be vulnerable a little bit in front of each other. If I'm going to be talking about my past 11 years, I hope that you'll be able to talk about a little bit about the last time you also asked for help. Sam. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I see someone's a developer. The last time they asked for help was 2-3 hours ago. Cool. Really good to see that. Sam, what did you ask for help with today?
I'm terrible. Yeah, Martin's saying he never, I don't know if you know, Martin said it to me, but he says he never asked for help. Yeah, and I'm really bad for not asking for help. So I'm trying to I just don't have time to do all of the stuff. And the board's a good example. We pushed out a slide deck last week asking for money. And Martin and I are literally going through this process, Chris, of how we set up constitutionally. I don't think we realised how well this would fit in. But there are subcommittees, and one of them met to have a conversation about what they're going to do. And it's not unusual for me to leave those meetings with quite a list of tasks. Whereas I know it's not exactly the same, because they came to me and asked me to do something, but I was like, oh no, you guys need to do it. So I said to them, I was like, I'll facilitate it, but this is you doing it. So it's me helping people to get on their own 2 feet, rather than me just taking away the work, which is the most common outcome of those.
Well, no, yeah, that's really good. Mark hasn't asked for help enough in the past, but recently signed up to a couple of business support programs. Yes, and hopefully they have been helpful and they will be helpful. Also, Paul asked for help the last week. Cool. Dave, can't recall the last time they've asked for help. Yeah, I completely empathize with that. A lot of the time, being in the sort of managerial position, being like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. I know exactly how I'm going to get there. We aren't necessarily used to admitting that we need help, because that's going to show that we're vulnerable, and that's not necessarily a good thing, right? When you're at that level. And one of the reasons, in my case at least, and I'm just going to push on with the presentation. In my case at least, one of the reasons why I haven't asked for help more often is because I didn't know how to ask for help. And the last bit about me, where I feel like you should know this before we launch into the rest of the presentation, is that I'm Eastern European. So my background is that I'm from Romania. I came to the UK in 2011, and this is going to be relevant in a second. And our culture is very much focused on individualism, right? My background is my parents are working class, and that's how they raised me. The whole idea was, you go out there and you show them that you're the best one, and that's the only way in which you're going to get an education, you're going to get a job, you're going to get money, and so on. However, that also meant that a lot of the time you had to do everything yourself. And as Mark will know, we work together when we do Game Anglia bits as co-founders and as fellow directors, is that if you decide to do everything yourself, sometimes you're going to have blind spots, not the very least because you're not going to have all of the knowledge that your partners, your friends, your colleagues are going to have. So what exactly are we going to be talking about today? First off, I'm going to go into a brief history of my background. Then we're going to be talking a little bit about mentorships and why those are important. What are the different types of mentorships, and what's something that you should really keep in mind when you're launching into a mentorship with someone? And lastly, we're going to go through offers and opportunities for support programs, especially if you're based in the east of England / Suffolk, but this should apply to everybody, no matter where you're based, as long as you're based in the UK. And the concepts themselves are international. Like everything that I'm going to talk about, you're going to have a local version of it. I'm going to show you some questions which I did not know were important when I started my entrepreneurship journey, and yeah, some of these may sound familiar to you. How will you pay people fairly? Why would anybody pay you what someone should pay you? So what's the fair, correct amount that your work is worth? Who are your customers? What are your income streams? So what exactly, who's going to pay you what, and why, how often, and where's that money going to be coming from? Who are your partners? Who are your competitors? Who's your team? What is your company culture, and what is your 3-year plan? So if you've ever done a business planning program, if you've ever done a business support program, if you've ever put together a business plan, you'll know that these are questions that should be in your business plan. I hadn't. So when I started my journey in 2010, I had no idea about these questions. And then as time went on, and we'll see exactly why in a bit, I didn't know why these questions were important or exactly how important they were. Throughout the talk, I'll also be talking about mindset, because that's also an important thing. And I'll start by saying that one bit of mindset I didn't know was important when I got started was that your time and skills have value beyond your salary. So you shouldn't necessarily be giving away your time and skills without keeping in mind that they are valuable, right? It's not that you shouldn't volunteer, because most of what I've done and most of what I do is still volunteering outside of my day job, but it's just keeping that in mind, that your time and everything that you know, everything that you do has a value. So now I'd like to take you back to 2010. That's a much younger version of me. I was 18 back then. Bottom right corner, you can see I still had hair. When we started something called Banda Photo. This was back in Romania. And what I now know that we did was that we put together skill development programs such as gamified treasure hunts, focusing on photography skills and peer learning. In total, we engaged about 500 people over 3 years or so worth of events. And we had partnerships with the likes of PepsiCo, the Romanian version of Waterstones, Huawei, and Toyota. As you can see, most of these were in kind, because I didn't have the knowledge to go and say, well, actually, yeah, we can promote you or we can do this, but you have to give us some money. This was all started by 5 friends in college, and you'll see in a little bit why exactly I didn't know those questions and I didn't know that we should ask for that. What we wanted to do was to offer an alternative to expensive photography courses that existed in Romania. And it all started as a reactionary group to a not-for-profit, which was nasty with us. We were like 16, 17 back then. When after we put together like a full business, a full course over the course of a month or so, where we brought like top tier photographers to teach entry-level photography to a bunch of young people who paid to be there, like something like a tenner, right? But it was still money that was in the bank. We were told that actually, no, you're young. We're just going to keep that money for you, and you should be grateful that we gave you the opportunity to do this. So we were like, or we could just walk out and start our own thing. And we sworn that money would not be important to us. Again, we were in college. As such, our revenue, other than those £2,000, was exactly zero, and we never kept track of our expenditure, which is not a good way to start a business. As a result, that entity no longer exists, and yeah, we stay in touch, but we always say that that not asking for what we were worth was the biggest mistake that we did, because as we would find out, the reason why money is important at that level and exactly where I am at the moment is that it's important because it buys you time, and we'll see in a little bit how I learned that. Fast forward to 2017, Mark and I got together and we're like, there's really, Mark, who's like in the chat here, there's really no games events happening in Suffolk at all at the moment. You're former Microsoft, I'm former Ubisoft. Maybe we should get our networks together and create an event. So that's how Game Anglia got started. This is the team for 2017. And yeah, we still keep in touch and work with many of these folks today. And we are to date the biggest game development conference in the east of England. We held 3 conferences, including 2 career fairs and a bunch of other programs in the time since. We had more than 500 attendees who paid. We had sponsors. We still work in kind. For example, when Adams comes to you and is like, hey, we'd like to give you some free beer to promote our brand, we're not going to say no. But since then, we also started learning that sponsorships are quite important. So we had quite a few sponsorships over the years. This was all started by Mark and myself, and our team is now bigger. But we started it when we were both employed, and at times we had teams of volunteers, which were 15 people or over. Ever since, as we started doing more projects, we started paying more people, which was a very big deal to us, because finally we knew that when people were giving us their time and their skills, we were able to compensate them fairly. So let's have a look a little bit at the timeline for Game Anglia. In 2017, we had 144 attendees and a budget of £5,000. In 2018, at that point, once we held our second conference, 300 attendees, £8,000 budget. And you can see that the numbers kept going up, right? So what was next? We had infinite potential, which is absolutely brilliant, right? There's an infinite market. We knew that there were about 800 to 900 game dev students throughout the east of England. We wanted to keep going. We wanted to do more than just the conferences themselves. We put together this whole brand document of how we were going to grow the games industry in the East of England. And to date, this is Game Anglia's purpose, to grow the games industry in the East of England by really investing time and programs into young people, into the independent game developers in the region, in order to make our region as good, if not better, than places like Guildford or Leamington Spa, which have a lot ahead of us. But we're not going to go into that now, right? So the year is 2019, 2018, 2019. I'm like, yes, I can see that infinite path going up. What am I going to do next? I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to take this full time, and we're going to become an actual company, which we hadn't been until then. So we incorporated as a not-for-profit, and we're a community interest company as of January 2019. I quit my job at that point, and I moved back to Romania in order to keep my costs low, because I realized that paying rent out of something like £3,000, which was about as much as I had set aside, wasn't going to cut it for more than a couple of months. And I would spend my time doing what I saw all of the other companies that I had worked with until then do: develop services and products and then sell those. Because everything that I had done until that point, Banda Photo and Game Anglia, and that's the case to this day, had been part-time in addition to a day job. I had, with the exception of 2 years in which I worked for Ubisoft, which is a really big games company, I had only worked for startups. So I knew that the path to profitability was to develop products and services and then sell those. So that's what I did, right? And as everybody here will be able to tell you, I decided to go and find clients in the educational sector, which is easy. Just call up a university and you're like, "Hi, dear University of Suffolk, could you like to pay us in order to do some stuff?" And like, "Yeah, sure, Chris. Let me just throw your money, some money your way." And that's how you make money, which didn't work out as well as I had planned. But we, all of our team worked their asses off, which was really good. And we programmed the Game Anglia 2019 events, which were a success. The image might be slightly small, but we had a big event in Ipswich and in Norwich and in Luton. So we had really gone throughout the East of England, and we put together this combination of career fair plus showcase plus conference, which looked a little bit like this. That's Mark and myself with a couple of game developers. That's a really big independent game developer, Mike Bethel, who was playing games at the University of Suffolk. And in order to get him there, Mark can tell you more about this, but what we ended up doing, because getting a train ticket from Manchester to Ipswich during peak time is so expensive, it was cheaper for us to fly him from Manchester to London and then get him train tickets from London to Ipswich than it was to just get him train tickets from Manchester to Ipswich. That says quite a bit about the state of our transport network. But he agreed to donate his time. He was a really lovely guy, and he judged our games. And quite a few people who he talked with now have jobs in the game industry, which is really cool. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. This is at Norwich University of the Arts, and these were the results. 500 attendees. We had about £10,000 that we managed to fundraise, which was really cool. And when you're looking at it, 2020, again, infinite potential. We all know how that went, but back in 2019, we're like, yes, we can do this even more. However, that came with quite a few costs, because at the end of that, I had run out of money. So I had to take on a new job. I had moved to London, which is slightly slightly more expensive than Suffolk. And Game Anglia also had an ERDF funded project in progress, which was also demanding. So at that point, Mark, Heather, who's our co-director, and myself sat down and we said, okay, let's have a look at this and put it in a triangle. Don't know if you can see all of that, but let's never again do something in which is remote, which is part-time, and which we do as volunteers, because that didn't work out, right? We were all doing a second job because we were volunteers, and we had to work a full-time job in order to cover our living expenses. We were volunteering because we have no idea how to run a not-for-profit and make it that profitable. And you may recall the previous money, like the 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. All of that went towards organizing events, because it turns out travel and putting together events, covering catering, and paying workshop holders is quite expensive. So we didn't pay ourselves for this, and also we were doing it remotely because I spent some time in Romania. So all of that, success, but at the end of it, I myself and quite a lot of the team was burning out quite fast. Enter 2020, which came with a pandemic intermission, during which time we all got new jobs. I had a commute reset because the pandemic had come in, so I was now able to spend two extra hours working on a couple of other things, or on myself, instead of working on or instead of staying on the tube, and it was really time to sit back and analyze and ask for help and talk with other people, including finding mentorships. So that's a segue into the second chapter, where we're going to be talking about mentorships. Before we do that, however, I'm just going to sip some tea and talk a little bit about stereotypes. So widely held but fixed, oversimplified images or ideas of particular persons or things. When I talk to Sam about this, and Sam's going to know this quite as well as myself, it was all about why a not-for-profit shouldn't be your first business, because it comes with a lot of stereotypes attached to it. A lot of people are going to be asking you, what do you mean you can pay yourself or charge people as a not-for-profit? Isn't that like the whole point of a not-for-profit? You don't make a profit. And at that point, it meant sitting down and being like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't pay themselves, right? So that's a stereotype that we need to take into account. Another stereotype, which you may be familiar with, is this image of gross domestic product. So how much countries produce, that it should always be up, always tending towards infinity. And it's a stereotype that we need to break. We sometimes need to choose stereotypes which are much more and graphics which are much more sustainable. Such as this one, which comes from a really lovely book called Donut Economics. Don't worry, don't try to read what's on it, because that's its own 2-hour lecture. But what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we need to break stereotypes. And it's exactly the same when you're talking about businesses and when you're talking to mentors. Most of the people who are business mentors who I've spoken with, either in London or in Suffolk, come from backgrounds such as, I built and successfully exited a bunch of tech companies, or I used to work for Lloyd's Bank or Barclays or whatever, and all we thought about was how to make things profitable and have that infinite growth that we were talking about, have that year-on-year KPI growth, more attendees, more programs, more people, more money. And that's a very toxic and damaging stereotype, because what they don't tell you about is sometimes all you need to do is be sustainable. Have enough money coming in order to pay your staff, pay the bills, and keep doing what you want to do. Everybody who's run a small games company is going to be able to tell you this. You're always trying to have enough success in order to be able to make your next project. I didn't know that coming in, and I didn't know that sustainability was an important thing. Also, when I was talking to mentors, what I didn't know about was things about paths to profitability. As I said at the beginning, most people are going to talk to you about these two things. You make services and you make products, and then you sell those. And that didn't work for me. If you remember that triangle, we were doing this remotely, part-time, and as volunteers, right? Generally speaking, when you're when you're in a startup, and say you have a tech startup, right? Your Facebooks, your Ubers, your whatever, what you're doing, and the curve over time. Let me just, can everybody see the laser pointer? Okay, so what you do is you spend a little bit of time, create a minimum viable product, then you spend so this is time, sorry, this is effort, this is time, right? You spend a little bit of time doing a minimum of viable product, an MVP. Then you spend a lot of time on sales and marketing to get those clients, to get those retainers, and then that becomes more sustainable. You spend a bit less effort on this long curve of retainers and subscriptions, which is really, really cool if you don't have another full-time job that you need to work 8 hours for. So I tried doing this, and it almost broke us. Right when we were at the end of 2020, we were like, okay, it doesn't really seem to work out because nobody is buying what we're selling. All of those educational institutions don't really want to take us on. We have this one project that was funded by the New Anglia LEP. That's with European money. We're out of the EU. That's not happening again. It's most likely not going to work out. But if you enter the mentorship, that really changed the way that I ended up looking at things, and to a degree that ended up getting me the current job that I'm in, is that there's a third way. And this is a mentorship that was started by the Mercury Theatre in Colchester, and we worked with an amazing mentor called Owen, who helped us realize that there's a third point here, and that is project-based funding. So the way that worked is that you spend a lot of time applying for stuff and putting together applications. You then, once they get funded, once they get approved, you spend a little bit of time doing prep work and setting things up, and then you ramp things up towards the end in this project delivery and reporting phase, in which you really put everything together. But at this point, everybody is paid, and they have an incentive to do it in order to deliver that project. And this worked for us because, if you remember, we were part-time and remote and volunteering. So we could put in time for the applications during the evenings or during the mornings or weekends or what have you, to write applications that we wouldn't need to spend in this previous business model, because this sales and marketing, you either do that with a lot of budget or you do it with a lot of time whilst everybody is also working. So you're spending a lot of time meeting up with people. Again, this was pre-COVID, so not many people would end up meeting with you, especially to give you money, unless you were doing this in person, especially in a place like Suffolk, where people really value those coffee chats, those pub chats, and so on. However, here, the time is spent mostly asynchronously until the project delivery bit. So the bits that I learned from that mentorship, and something that I want to encourage you to do, is to spend more time delegating, to take your team on a journey together with you, because that's really important. And remember that asking for help is a constant struggle, right? And Mark knows this, and Heather will know this as well. We had things really started to change for us when we started having more regular meetings and talking about the things that we didn't know how to do, when we started talking about who were the people who we previously considered competitors, and changing that and turning it into not how we're going to beat them, but how are we going to collaborate and make sure that we can work together with them. And again, this is all about asking for help, which is a constant struggle. It's not a light switch where you're like, now I know how to ask for help. It's more along the lines of reminding yourself and talking to your team about how you're going to ask for help from the people in your network, because there's really some amazing people. Sam is one of them, Mark's another one of them. I'm sure that you're all formidable in and of yourselves, who can help you. But you first need to send that email. You need to schedule that call and ask for help. And also to understand that there's different business support strands for everybody. So, having a mentor who's from Lloyd's or who exited a successful tech company may not be for yourself. Somebody who's managed not-for-profits, that might be who's able to help you better. Try and match yourself with people who are going to have similar experiences to you, but they're like 1, 3, 5 years ahead of you, because that's where the real help is going to come from. And also, this is going to sound a bit harsh, but feel free to discount the advice of people who haven't been in your shoes and who don't have a stake in your company, because their advice is out there and is as cheap as coal, right? As cheap as chips. Everybody's going to have an opinion. They're all going to know how to help you. But just as I haven't told you all of the other jobs that I've gone through and all of the other projects that Game Anglia have done between 2017 and where we are today, just because we didn't have 5 hours to tell you about it, and Sam knows how we each spent half an hour just talking at each other for half an hour. When every time we meet and we're like, yeah, we did this, and this, and now we need some help here. They're not going to have the people who you're going to talk with, who are going to give you advice, who don't have a stake in your business, aren't necessarily going to have all of the background and insights that you have. And if you're like me, you may not be able to explicitly be able to tell that to them in a very concise manner. So yeah, that was the mentorship. And this is how these are the types of partnerships that we've been able to make over the past, I want to say 9 to 12 months. And most of these have been because we had that mindset of, hey, maybe we should work together instead of competing. Hey, maybe this is one thing that we've done in the past that may help you. Or hey, we saw you have this cool new program. Would you like to help the East of England? And so on and so forth. So that's the bit about mentorships. And I wanted to break here for a second and ask if anybody had any questions before we go into the business support section of this.
I've got one question, just because this comes up in my life a lot. What do you consider the difference to be between coaching and mentoring?
I feel like they're very similar, right? And I feel like all coaches are mentors, but not all mentors are coaches. It's that sort of inclusion deal, where a coach is somebody who is going to sit with you and help you as a person rather than as a business, whereas a mentor is going to mostly focus on the business aspect of things. So it's the difference between, I guess the way that I see it is the difference between having going to the gym, right, and spending some time with a fitness, let's just call them like a fitness coach, who's going to actually sit with you and understand more about your psychology, why you end up exercising, and then help you with everything from like a meal plan to an exercise plan to maybe helping you with suggesting suggesting personal development books and things like that, as opposed to just spending like 6 classes doing cardio.
And so which is the latter? The
latter is the mentoring.
Is the mentor. So I don't, the literal definition, because I work with loads of business coaches, they get right weird about this, is that mentors can advise you, whereas coaches can only let you advise yourself. So there's a sort of a layer of abstraction in as far as you have to come to the conclusion, but they can ask you the right questions, and that's the specialism. But I think that because I keep wondering if there's more like a term around trainer, because I think the trouble with coaching in digital is a lot of the stuff we do is untrodden pathways. So there is no terminology for it yet. Like we're having to learn a lot and deliver a lot. This is all brand new areas, really. So yeah, no, interesting point. But I think I think we need a new term, is what I think. Yeah.
I agree with you. That could be the case. Yeah, the way that I see it is a coach also has those almost like the skills almost like a therapist, right? To help you understand why you got there and like understand you more about yourself, help you understand more about yourself.
That would be the mentor. So a mentor is about you, whereas the coach is about, and again, it could be coaching in your own, so you could be coached on something personal, but in most of the instances I know, the coaching is around the business, whereas they can dig down, and the dig down is, again, I think both can apply to both.
Yeah.
But it's the sort of granular element. A note from our vice chair of the ISTN: if there isn't any terminology, make it up. So that's an official statement, guys.
Always. Yeah, and I should caveat this, right, before I go into the business support programs, is whenever I say mentoring, I mean for your business more than for yourself, right? What you said you'd see as coaching. So please just keep that in mind. When I say mentoring, that's just spending time with somebody helping you for your business rather than you as an entrepreneur or you as a programmer or whatever.
The takeaway is ask that question. So if you get a coach or a mentor or a trainer or whatever, really, if that was my advice, would be like really lay out nice and early, this is what I'm looking for. Because I think, like Chris, I early doors just sort of took what I was given and didn't form it into what I needed. So probably that's what Chris is about to cover. Yeah, I think it's worth knowing that that's a question you should ask.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was a lot of things, right? And it was a lot of things. And the reason why I wouldn't suggest starting with a not-for-profit is all of those stereotypes that come with the term, right? Again, we're talking terminology, we're talking words and vocabulary. Is that when you're thinking about a not-for-profit, you're not thinking, oh, these people actually manage to pay themselves a wage in order to survive, right? Which is so important, right? People pay yourselves, right? At the end of the day. Right, so let's go into business support. I think this is going to take about 15 minutes or thereabouts. And we start with a detour into the politics of England. Yay! Woo. Because it's so important. It's so important to understand politics and policy if you're going to understand business support, especially these two maps. You should have some reactions, I think. If not, let me know in the chat if you've seen these two maps before. Sam, have you seen them? Like, or the terminology, like LEPs and local government.
100%. Yeah. Have I seen those specific maps? No. Do I know what those things mean? 100%. Do I have lists of all of the people that they relate to? 100%.
Yes, definitely. So local governments, this is Suffolk right here. And this is a map of the east of England. Some bits around here can be mildly contested in terms of whether some places are Greater Essex or Greater London, for example, but we're not going to go in there. But these are, as far as I know, districts within Suffolk, and this is these are local enterprise partnerships, right? This is something that came about back in the 2010s or thereabouts, when the European Union was like, you should have bigger areas that support your businesses. And thankfully, when you're looking at this, you'll see that Suffolk is actually part of two LEPs. This is the New Anglia LEP. It covers Suffolk and Norfolk, and this is the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough LEP, which also covers bits of Suffolk, which is really good when you're looking at business support programs, because it means that you can talk to either one, and they're going to be able to help you. They each have their own separate budgets, which means that potentially you'll be able to get more budgets, more funding, more access to opportunities. And within local government itself, we're gonna go into in a bit. There's similar things, because these are the people that get paid to help you. So we talked a little bit about all of those KPIs earlier, that year-on-year growth and so on. Every one of the people that I'm going to talk about, or the entities that I'm going to talk about in the next 5 minutes or so, are actually paid to help you. They're people who you want to tell, hey, I'm here. How can you help me? This is what I do. And most of the time they're going to come back and be like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of things we can do. So your first one are your local councils. These are your Felixstowe Town Council, for example. They have grants for businesses. It's not a lot. It's about £3,000 or thereabouts, but they can still give you some money to do stuff in Felixstowe, which is really great. Ipswich is another one. Every local council is going to have a pot of money and some business support programs that are being led by their economic development officers, who are all going to be very happy to help you, because you're a business that reached out to them. So, you know, either their marketing works, or somebody told them that they should be contacted. Otherwise, what ends up happening, and that's going to be the case with all of these, is that they end up, all of the money, all of the business support ends up going to the same 10 businesses who just happen to have been at the right pub at some point to talk to somebody from those places. Then you have your county councils, which are slightly bigger. So, for example, the Suffolk County Council has a COVID recovery scheme, where they put quite a bit of money to help businesses on the high street, or businesses that deal face-to-face with people, to help them recover. This wasn't the case for us with Game Anglia necessarily, but we are talking to them and we're doing stuff together for a few things. Mostly around communities. LEPs, so your local enterprise partnership. The New Anglia LEP has a peer mentoring scheme. So if your business is making, I think, over £100,000 a year in terms of turnover, then you can join that scheme. It looks pretty cool. That wasn't the case for us because we're relatively small. And your chambers of commerce, which I'm being told that you're going to be hearing a lot more about in the next 1 to 2 years, especially after we hear more about the government's budget and how that's being allocated on the 27th of October. So that's a date for your calendar. And what's interesting about the chambers of commerce is that you get, on one hand, bigger ones, Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, right? Each county has its own chamber of commerce, but then smaller places also have their chambers of commerce. Like the Braintree Chambers of Commerce is a thing, and they're not affiliated with the Essex Chamber of Commerce, which I thought was really interesting. So do have a look up in the places that you've worked in the past and search town Chamber of Commerce and see what comes up.
I have an extra thing in here. Also use the term business association, and what you'll find is that there are some business associations that then specialize. So, I mean, you'd almost call the ISTN a business association.
Hint at the future Sam there. So these are all government funded, right? And then almost each sector is going to have their own government funded body. So when you're looking, for example, at skills, this DCMS, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, they have their own bigger fund. So if you search for, I don't know, DCMS Suffolk, you'll be able to find some bits which are specifically funded by that for skills. You also have bigger bodies like the CIC, the Creative Industries Council, that is government funded and that helps the creative industries. But you also have the private sector, which we're going to talk about in a bit. And again, these are people paid to help you. ISTN, for example, can offer you knowledge, networking, and all sorts of local opportunities. Places like Tech Nation, Tech East, they can help you with business support, access to co-working spaces. They put together a lot of events and things like that. Capital Enterprise and Enterprise Nation, again, allow you to do that as well. They offer business support programs, mentoring, grants, and so on. So subscribe to these. Most of them, Tech Nation, Tech East, Capital Enterprise, Enterprise Nation, they are membership focused. So sometimes they may ask you to pay a fee, but if you ask them nicely, you'll notice that they will all also have a free tier membership, and that's what you need to start with, and that's going to give you access to most of their events, right, or most of their programs. So yeah, do check that out. And also, this is my place to plug the company that I'm currently working with, Creative England. So my job is, my day job is working as a program manager. So I'm one of those people paid to help you. With Creative England, we merged with the Creative Industries Federation back in 2019, and we're now part of a bigger group called the Creative UK group. And our purpose is to help grow the creative industries throughout the UK. My bit specifically is Creative England, so I work in here, putting together a program of business support across games, film, TV, all of the screen sectors, as well as manage a small pot of funding for screen businesses based in the English regions outside of London. And yeah, if you're interested, just drop me an email or search Creative Enterprise and you'll see everything that we do. But in addition to this, as part of Creative UK, we also have the Creative Industries Federation, or the Fed as it's more formally known. That is a huge policy and advocacy group, which helps the creative people who work in the creative industries have a better standing when it comes to talking to policymakers. So for example, one thing that we're doing at the moment that may interest some of you is that we're putting together a freelance charter, where we are going to go to the government and tell them how we think, or rather how freelancers think they should be treated, come up with new ideas for contracts and ways in which freelancers can be supported by the companies that they're working with. And we also provide and like Creative Growth Finance, which is loans up to £1 million for creative industry businesses who are high growth. So you must have had, I think, over £300,000 of turnover in the past year or so in order to qualify for this. But yeah, we've helped a bunch of game companies. And generally speaking, when I'm saying the creative industries, I also mean the companies which are making tech for the creative industries, which I think is a lot more relevant for this group. But also film companies, production companies, animation companies, VFX companies, games companies. And the way that we work is across 3 priorities: people, place, and planet. And everything that you're going to see from us over the next year plus is going to be focusing on these priorities. So to recap, there's a bunch, and this is the most important slide. This is my next to last slide, is everything that's out there to help you with business support. I split this into three categories. The first one are what's called what we call open access support. So this is open to everybody. You just need to sign up. These can be your one-off webinars, such as this one, or your open networking events, such as I don't know. I think there's quite a few. Ed, you were putting together some networking events for Suffolk techie people, for Suffolk people, weren't you? I don't know if Ed is in the chat. Yeah. Sam, you're still muted.
I can see it in there.
Yeah. But yeah, anything that's open networking where people can just show up and talk, we call that open access support, and you'll be able to find these, like, just as Elena found us through Meetup. Then you have your intensive business support, and this is your multi-session courses and programs, your medium to long-term mentoring. And again, when I say mentoring, it's basically working with somebody to help you with your business. And then you have your funding, which I don't know if anybody here has some experience with that, but everything that I'm about to tell you, I had no idea was as well structured about a year ago, but I've learned all of this, and I really hope you're gonna take some of this with you into your own businesses. So those are your project-based grants. For example, the way that Game Anglia put together the Level Up program, that was a project-based grant, and what we did was we went to the New Anglia LEP and we were like, we want to help a bunch of young people who are unemployed develop their skills in order to get jobs in the games industry, and some of them did, and they funded us. But that was specifically for that project. Like, we got the money, we spent it as we said that we would spend it, and then we ended the project and provided the report. Then you have your capital support grants. So these are usually going to come from your maybe chambers of commerce, maybe local councils, who are giving you some money in order to do things like buy equipment, in order to do things, and that could be anything from a laptop to a VR set to a combine harvester, all the way to potentially subsidizing some of your rent. Then you have your company level grants, where you're basically going and saying, hi, I have a company. I would like to spend some time with a consultant in order to put together a 3-year business plan. And then the funder gives you some money to do that. But then, and that's at the company level, so it's either company level grants or business support grants, which you'll be able to find more about if you Google for that. Then you had your debt-based financing, which can either be by company guarantee or personal guarantee. So as I was saying earlier, Creative Growth Fund, that's company guarantee. Basically, your company takes some money and the company is to give it away. If you don't and you default, then there's some bad stuff coming your way, but it's only coming for your company. And then there's your personal guarantee of debt-based financing or loans, where it's you, the person, who's guaranteeing things like your assets, your house, your whatever against that. I don't really like for startups, that doesn't necessarily work as easily, but for people who are like plumbers or electricians, who know that they have a steady income stream and they just need some more money to buy equipment or to go to training courses, that might work, right? It's just keep these terms in mind, like personal guarantee, very, very important one. And then you have what's more colloquially known as funding, equity investment, in which somebody gives you money for a percentage of your business. And that could be anything from 5% for £10,000, or everything that you see at Dragon's Den, that's mostly going to be equity investment. And yeah, these are not controversial, but some people are going to be very okay with giving away parts of their company, other people won't, in which case you have these other bits here: debt-based financing, company level grants, which can be quite important and very useful. And that's about it. I just want to, because this is all about asking for help, I'm just going to pause my screen share for a second. I'm actually going to stop my screen share. I'm going to get my email out, get an email out in which I've asked for help from someone, which I think is going to show you a bit more about the type of mindset that you need to be in. So where is it? Opportunities, right? So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Actually, yeah, I'm going to quickly share my screen. This is an email that I sent to the local council where I moved, basically saying, hi, this is me. This is what we do. Is there anything that we can do to help you? We have this sort of experience. These are the bits that we've done in the past. Can we like do anything? So they then came back. So this is again the local council, right? The people who are paid to help you. And they came back and they were like, yeah, sure. We're currently actually working on putting together a creative hub. I think that it would be really great to chat with you. And yeah, we're still talking at the moment. And that was really, really cool because I didn't necessarily expect a response. But again, it's all about that mindset and all about asking for help that I thought that I would share. Just because for me, it was very transformative to start thinking, oh, wait a minute, my local council, my county council, etc. They aren't just the people who I pay taxes to. They actually get paid to help businesses out. I'm a business. Maybe they could help me out. And on that note, I'm going to end the presentation there. I'm going to leave you with my Twitter and my email. And if there's anything that I can do to help you, yeah, just let me know, and I'll be happy to help you. And we can open into
Can I have
questions.
some money, please, Chris?
No, sorry about that, Sam. We're not a funder. Like if you want, we can.
Okay, that's what I have to say. That's the more common response. Right, has anyone got any questions for Chris? That's been amazing. Oh, Martin's telling me you can try. You can either put your questions in the chat or ask any questions now. If anyone's got any personal experience as well, that'd be super useful. I'm going to just be quiet until you all feel super awkward. I'm joking.
Yeah. No, that's a technique, Sam. It's like keeping silent, and somebody will break the silence. So I'm just going to mute myself.
John, give us some advice. You've sat the right side of the money conversation for a long time.
I think what's really important at the start and the early stage is having conversations. What you don't want to do is be reinventing the wheel. If someone's been there and done it, it's surprising how generous most people are, and they will give you stuff. They will give you hopefully fair advice. Sam, the comment you're making about mentoring and coaching is a kind of a tricky one, because you need to find people who kind of get where you're going, but also aren't afraid of saying, I think you're on the wrong road. And it's a kind of an extension of the rambling a bit now, like the Dragon's Den thing, giving away a slice of the action is a good thing if there's plenty of money and it's a fair division. It's a bad thing if it's not a lot of money and it's not a fair division of time, effort, and kind of intellectual property.
And this is exactly like, I really like what you said, John. And this is exactly why I said that your first business shouldn't be a not-for-profit. Because as soon as you are a limited company, limited by guarantee, instead of being limited by shares, and you have a not-for-profit constitution, the way that Game Anglia does at the moment, you suddenly don't have the biggest leverage point that a limited company that's limited by shares has, which is giving you a part of the company, and 2, dividends, because by definition, a CAC can't issue dividends. So that's why I'm like, if you want to start a company, start it as a for-profit, like do something for profit. And as soon as you're like, I'm gonna give you 5% of my company, it's not a lot, right? But it's enough to get somebody in the game and to give them a stake that they're gonna be willing to help you, give you like a day of their time or half a day of their time from time to, like every 3 months to help advise you.
And if you're doing some activity, if there's not a profit, you can't reinvest in what you're doing. So the kind of, I think there can be quite a bit of confusion about what not-for-profit means. I do a reasonable amount of stuff with social enterprises, and I start off by saying profit is a good thing, loss a bad thing. And if you're kind of super sensitive about making a profit, you've got a bit of a problem.
Well, yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. As a CAC, you can reinvest in yourself, right? You just can't take dividends. You can give yourself a salary and so on.
I didn't mean you got a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, in general terms.
Oh yeah.
It's if you start making money, and there's profits, you can reinvest those profits in doing more of the good stuff that you're doing.
Yeah. Can I chuck something in? Because I think I'm the same as you, Chris, and you know how cynical I am about the whole thing. And we're finally getting some traction. But I have a private company. It does other stuff. It has separate projects. I think one of the biggest considerations, particularly if you're like Chris and I, where you work in a space that is the tech space, very often we are a voice, an internal voice, and the government /LEP/ anyone in those roles often don't understand what we're talking about, like literally do not understand the constitution, the foundations of what we do. And that would be my bit of advice, is don't underestimate this. There are many, I have these conversations all the time, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there are many situations where lots of people look at our sector, and our sector is digital or technical. If you really lift the lid on that, like how much is inside that? Probably about 12 to 15 sectors inside as well. But it all gets lumped together. And what non-technical people do is kind of pepper a bit of digital on and think, well, there you go, it's fine. Which means we've got in this country particularly very poor technological foundations. So they're not poor in as far as you can generally get, you know, the telco part of it is looked after, the constitution from that perspective. But we have no regulations in large sections of our community. And that's a huge big deal, in my opinion, anyway. Now, so the trouble is that incentivizing people to create regulations, nobody wants that. So there are certain, I feel now that I've kind of detached from, I mean, this for me was never about money making, but it was around consumer protection. I sit very much at that kind of front end, back end and integration element, and at least stimulating the conversation around what am I buying, why am I buying it, how does it work, seems valuable. But it's difficult when you take it to those helpers, those advisors. This is brand new territory, and untrodden roads are hard to explain to. So it's like, come along, it's going to be great. And they're like, no, that feels really uncertain, because the one thing they want is a known quantity. And it's really hard for them. And I think I've sat, like, you know, Chris, I've sat and watched it sort of play out for the last 5 or 6 years and think, oh, that's not really worked. But it could have worked a long time ago. It's just the wrong. I said to someone last week, I said, you're going to come to me with lots of stuff and you'll find 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say that's the wrong question. You know, and fundamentally people are asking the wrong questions, and that's very frustrating. But we're going to make some traction with this. It'll be slow and it will be steady. It isn't going to make anyone any money, but these are, even being a disruptor, being an opposition is a good position to be in. You should be poking at things, in my opinion. I think it's quite a healthy place to be, but don't underestimate that when you take your technical skills to the table, because no one else has got any. So you're immediately more valuable if you have a 3-dimensional and technological view on it. And I think that's what I've started to realize over time as well. So I don't know if that's useful.
Yeah, no, it is. And being able to understand that, right? That's why I decided to take that detour into understanding more about how decisions are being made, especially when it comes to people who get paid to help you. Again, it's all about, you need to understand how things work, right? In order to be able to actually go out there and be disruptive and do what you do, right? Many people, if you don't have a not-for-profit, it's quite easy because you know who your clients are, right? It's either B2B or B2C, and most of your clients are going to come from the private sector, right? As soon as you're going into anything that has to do with the public sector, as soon as you're going into the people who are benefiting aren't the people who are in a position to pay me, that's when having an understanding of the political landscape is really important. Having an understanding of emerging trends and policies is really important. And that's when you need to start understanding, well, it's basic sales, right? It's just that you're selling to different people, why somebody should give you money and how to speak their language.
To add an extra one into that as well is, where are they going wrong? And I don't say, again, that's nobody, I've worked in sales forever. You never ever slag off the opposition and talk about the problems. You're there to add benefits. But actually, after having done this part for a few years, sometimes there are fundamental flaws in the way that people have gone off down a road, and sort of turning up and saying, just rethink that. Like, so when you send the email, it's not just a case of like, can we work together? It is a case of, I've noticed something recently with the project that I've been working on, and I went back and said, I don't think this is right. Like, you've made estimates about the marketplace. I'm in the marketplace. That's not correct. I just want to give it to you. And they went away and had to think about it. And it's a continuing conversation. But I think that's a valuable position to be in. And I'm kind of known as being miserable and saying my piece. but I won't apologize or shy away from it, because sometimes, and not reasonably often actually, I'll say to them, oh, okay, that's a good point. That's the point, is that, but in order for there to be more of us, I've said this for a while in our sector, there aren't enough of us, which means there are very few auditors. So we don't have anyone checking our work, which no other sector has. All other sectors have some sort of regulation or someone checking the work, and we're a little way off that. But actually, that seems like, I do feel like that's my purpose, is to build, lead the war cry of auditors.
Especially where we are, right? Especially when you look at Suffolk, Norfolk, Essex, right? The reason why Game Anglia exists is because we saw a gap in the market, and we saw that you had 800 people currently in education, and that was between what's now 8 universities and about a dozen colleges, and there was literally nothing for them. Like, oh, I want to meet up with somebody who's a level designer. There was no way of doing it, right? I want to meet up with somebody who's made a AAA game. There was no way of doing it. I'm like, what if we were to do it, right? Because I'm like, even to go back even beyond even before 2010, I really started to put together programs and things like that. When somebody told me, when I told them, oh, it's a shame nobody's doing this, and they're like, you're somebody, why don't you do it, right? Like, you know this, Sam, we talked about this, but and that,
when I met you, literally, I was just coming to the end of my bit, and I said, don't do it. Literally,
yeah,
because it's hard and it really is wearing. And I think if the overriding advice is, if you're going to do the thing you love, and I think sadly for Chris and I, the thing we love is making this type of change, and it takes quite a long time to get traction. But actually, there is another conversation around this, which is just running a pure startup like this. I genuinely think that we could make money out of the type of thing we do if we just did it personally and privately, in as far as you could go to school or you could get a private tutor. Like, there are people who really want to finesse and get good at this stuff. So I think pick your battles. But I think in order to I think that's what's quite nice about it. There is almost a kind of like a citizenship part of it. You're 100% right that the people that this work will impact on are not going to pay for the service other than through their taxes. But it really matters that they get great service. And every time we do something and it has a positive impact on Suffolk, it's hard not to be proud about that. And that's really the value, isn't it?
Totally, and again, our mission and part of my frustration. So it all started because, one, when I was, again, my background and so on, when I was a student, we had opportunities to go to London and go to EGX and all of these big trade fairs, and I couldn't afford them, right? Because the train to Suffolk to London back then was 28 quid, which was still a lot, and I just couldn't afford it. Not to mention going to a pub, etc., etc. So we're like, if I can't be the only one who's had this experience, right? There's so many people who are in poverty in Suffolk. There's so many people who come from working class backgrounds in Suffolk, right? That can't afford these sorts of things. What are we doing? Because we're excluding them, as I felt excluded, and I don't want anybody else to feel like that. So I want to help, and this is what I know how to do. And then the second bit was, and again, if we go back all the way to the 2019 conference, the team, which Mike Bithell selected as having had the best game, was really cool. They went and showcased their game and so on, and that was really nice. But they ended up disbanding because they didn't, like, nobody actually sat them down and was like, okay, here's the difference between owning a company with your friends and making a game with your friends, which are two completely different things. So they disbanded, and now one of the most promising people in that company moved back to Brighton and is now employed in Brighton, right? And she's doing some really cool things for the Brighton ecosystem. So why wasn't there something to keep her in Suffolk, where she went to uni for 3 years? Yeah. Right, and that's not the only thing. She's not the only person who's had that happen to them, just because there weren't opportunities there. So I think, on my end, speaking of asking for help, if anybody here wants to do a project together, we're more than happy to help. Talk to Mark, talk to myself. We're here. You know what we do. We put together skill development programs. We put together business development programs for game companies in the region, as well as for young people in the region. So yeah, if you want to chat with us, I'm more than happy to work together on something, or bring us together on a project. We can do lots of things.
Yeah, I think you're right as well. And the ISTN, I mean, we're just pushing out for sponsorship at the moment, but our only remit is to take existing and fledgling meetups, which would include Game Anglia and any events that they run. So we're about to move into putting the kind of marketing machine in place so that we can just sit there and be the bring the audiences together essentially. And when we look at digital tech, so that's digital marketing education through to IoT, which is a hugely broad spectrum. So I can see that being cut up over the years. We should be split up into at least 2 or 3 groups, I think. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's lovely. I mean, I had a meeting today with one of our subcommittees, actually 2 of our subcommittees. We have a subcommittee who look at education and a subcommittee who look at diversity. And they are about to go and look at how they embed better, just help really. And so the first thing we're going to do is go and have a conversation with local educators to see what they're offering, how they're offering, and then how this team can help. And that's a really specific, we're not, again, as John says, don't recreate something if we can turn up and help. But also what we would quite like to do is create resource that if some colleges and schools are far ahead. So it's quite nice if you can work with those ones, but record the assets and send it back again. So whoever's doing it well, take the best lessons from that, will do something with it and send it back again. So it's about, for me, kids across the whole of East Anglia and all establishments. And again, all classes. It doesn't make any difference to me. I don't care where you're from. I mean, I think it's one of the careers that could definitely, if you're good at this stuff, there's lots of work.
Yeah, and definitely, and like that's how we got the Into Games partnership that you saw. We only got that because we talked to somebody about the thing that we did in Suffolk, and they were like, "Would you like to do it again? We may have some private funding for you." And that was really great because it was that level of let's partner with these people, let's talk about what we do, let's be conscious of what our IP is and what our assets are and what we can do. And for us, as you'll know, Sam, right? We're a bunch of people again. All us volunteers are all us directors are volunteers, right? But we're part-time, and and that means that we can't do everything. Nobody can do everything, and that's also a big part of asking for help. We can deliver really cool programs, right? We can put together programs. I managed to get a job as a program manager, which is really cool because I had no idea that job existed 8 months ago. And what we can't do is we can't do marketing for shit. And we are not the best when it comes to things like recruitment and things like that, right? So if we can just work on putting together a program, it's going to be a really cool program, right? At the moment, for example, there's some apprenticeships going on in games that have just been approved by the higher bodies, which approve apprenticeships, and we're putting together a program to help people into those apprenticeships. So again, we can work with you. We want to work with you. To do stuff like this. Yeah.
That is amazing. So yeah, I mean, it's all really useful. Stay in touch with Chris as well. Ed's on the call too. There's a lot of people on this call who do a lot of community work. So I think, one of the biggest things for me, and Kenny, I mentioned your superheroes recently. Kennedy, sorry, I mentioned your superheroes recently. I think there's a place for that to come back again. I think that kind of, there's definitely an appetite for this stuff at the moment. So I think between myself, between Chris, Ed, Kennedy, anyone, and Martin's vice chair, David's here who runs OWASP, anyone who can help. Like there's lots of willing participants. Guys, I'm going to draw this to an end because I've decided I'm going to cook myself some dinner because why not?
Oh, can I just make one suggestion? I missed first basically most of your talk because I just come off from a meeting with a client. But one thing that I learned from business school is that it's actually always good to ask for help, because actually the person who maybe helped you are actually more than happy to help you as well. It's also about value generation as well, because sometimes for you maybe just take you a minute, but actually worth a lot to that person that's receiving it. And if the more we do for the other people, the more value we generate for everybody. So the whole pot becomes bigger than become smaller if you're all taking. So we're all giving other than taking. So think of it as a giving other than a taking. So that will make everybody's happy and
it is so true. It's lovely. And actually, that's the thing. I think, most of us have been knocking around meeting for years now. I mean, I've known most of you for the best part of a decade, or some of you for the best part of a decade now, or certainly 6, 7, 8 years, like heading towards a decade. And we're all still doing the same things. And we used to meet in real life. I'm sure we will again one day. It's one of the things I'm in our slide deck looking for sponsorship. I'd written this content around the fact that we're small and mighty. One of our strengths is that we're so small. Can we all know each other? Which on one level is that kind of like, oh, you know, we're all related. Yeah, super healthy. If you tell one of us, we'll all like share the good news. So that feels like the advantage, a competitive advantage to us. So you know, I think definitely, and I can't wait. I'm watching already this younger generation come through, and I'm really keen to get them onboarded here, get them creating some. Again, I'm super conscious. I mean, I'm a Gen X, but millennials and Gen Zs learn differently. They're going to need this information differently. Like, it isn't appropriate. I'm happy to organise it and get people around the table. It's not my job to speak. It's the next generation's job. We've got to start getting this stuff ready for them, which I think is entirely doable as well. So, right, guys, I'm going to go and make chicken piccata, Cheesecake Factory style. So you're almost welcome. If any of you want to come around, John's the closest, most welcome to come around.
Thank you.
Dinner will be about an hour. But if not, I will see you guys. We've got another talk. We've got Warcheck, who is here at the moment, and gave us a little view of his throat. And hopefully we are going to get to see his actual face on Thursday, where we've got a talk called AppSec for a Penny. Which is amazing. So thank you for that. And we've got even more talks coming. We'll have some in November. We won't do many in December, I suspect, and we'll be back with a full suite in January. If you've got any talks that you want us to arrange, let us know. If there's anything else we could do to help, let us know. There's a lot going on, basically. But thank you very much to Chris. A pleasure as always. I love the fact that I think we've got so much in common. We've tried our hardest here, and we are finally getting a bit of traction, Chris. So it's all looking good. And I'm glad you've got that job. That's the perfect job for you, really, helping people to help people.
Yeah,
seems like
definitely.